My name is Ethan Davis. And this is my story. I was 17 when I first came across it. The deep web sounds cliché, doesn't it? Every horror movie or internet rumor describes it as this shadowy corner of the online world, full of illegal activities, grotesque subcultures, and things better left unseen. But like most teenagers, I was curious. I had heard the stories. I had read the warnings. But that didn't stop me. It all started on a lazy Saturday afternoon. My parents were out of town, visiting my aunt in another state, so I had the house to myself. It was the perfect opportunity to surf the internet without anyone breathing down my neck. I had been playing video games all morning, but I had grown bored. There was only so much you could do before you needed something more, something exciting, something real. That's when I remembered the stories. The ones about the dark web. The underground network that supposedly housed all kinds of forbidden things. You could buy anything there, or so they said. Drugs, weapons, even people. But, beyond that, there were also rumors of people getting lost in the abyss of it all, disappearing without a trace. I had read about sites that claimed to have live streams of bizarre, unsettling footage, strange things filmed by people who were deep in the shadows. And, of course, being the stupid teenager that I was, I wanted to see it for myself. I knew the basics. I had Tor set up on my laptop, and I was familiar with the process. After all, there are tons of tutorials on how to access the deep web. I didn't think it would be anything more than a curiosity, a brief thrill that would last maybe a few minutes before I moved on to something else. But once I logged into Tor, things didn't go as I expected. It wasn't just the typical scams or fake marketplaces I found. No, it was something darker. The first thing that caught my eye was a site called VoidCam. It had a simple interface. Just a black background with a live video feed, a clock in the corner, and a small chat window. The feed itself was grainy, and the lighting was poor. It showed what appeared to be an abandoned building, its walls covered in peeling paint, its floors littered with debris. A dim light flickered in the corner, illuminating the shadow of a man moving through the space. The man was disheveled, dressed in ragged clothes. His eyes darted around nervously as if searching for something, or maybe someone. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his hands trembled. I couldn't look away. I watched for a few more minutes, my curiosity growing. Who was this man? Why was he in this creepy building? Was it real? Was it just some sick prank? The feed cut to black suddenly, then reappeared. This time, the camera angle had shifted. I could see the man more clearly, and something caught my attention. He was no longer alone. There was someone else standing behind him, a tall, dark figure with a hood. The man didn't see him at first, but then he turned around. His face twisted in terror, and I heard him scream, an ear-piercing, blood-curdling scream. The feed cut again. I sat there for a moment, my heart racing. Was this real? Could it be? I didn't know, but something told me to leave the site. But I didn't. Something deep inside me urged me to stay. So, I clicked the refresh button. The next feed was different. This time, it was a woman. She was in a dimly lit room, tied to a chair. Her eyes were wide with fear, her body trembling. The camera was positioned just above her, looking down on her as if someone was watching her closely from above. The woman was trying to speak, but the tape over her mouth muffled her cries. And then, I saw the man. He walked into the frame, a dark figure in a mask. He didn't say a word, just stood there staring at her. He took a knife from his pocket, and with slow, deliberate movements, he cut the tape from her mouth. She gasped for air, her face red from the pressure of the tape. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please let me go." The man didn't respond. He just raised the knife. I could hear the blade slicing through the air, the sound sending a chill down my spine. And then the feed cut again. I sat there for a long time, unable to move. My mind raced. What had I just seen? Was it real? Or was it just some elaborate hoax? I tried to convince myself it was the latter, that it was all staged. But something about it didn't feel fake. The desperation in that woman's voice, the eerie silence that followed, it felt too real. Too sinister. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to see more. But curiosity got the better of me. I couldn't stop myself. I refreshed the page. This time, the stream was different. The camera was moving, and I could hear footsteps. It was shaky at first, but as the camera stabilized, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was an alley. Dark, narrow, and empty. The camera zoomed in on a dumpster at the far end, and then it panned over to a figure standing near it. It was a man. He was staring into the camera, his face twisted into a grotesque smile. His eyes were wide, bulging, and his skin was pale, almost sickly. His clothes were torn, and there was a deep gash running down the side of his face. But it wasn't his appearance that horrified me. It was the way he looked at the camera. He knew he was being watched. And he didn't care. I felt a chill run through me as I watched him step toward the camera. His footsteps echoed in the alley, each one seeming to grow louder as he approached. He reached out, and for a moment, I thought he was going to touch the screen, his fingers brushing against the lens. But then, he stopped. The feed cut. I stared at the black screen, my heart hammering in my chest. I was shaking, drenched in cold sweat. I didn't know what to think anymore. Was it all staged? Or had I stumbled upon something much darker? Something real? I tried to convince myself it was a prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I had seen enough to understand that there was something deeply wrong about what I was witnessing. The next stream I clicked on wasn't like the others. This time, the feed was much clearer. It showed a quiet suburban street at night. The camera was positioned across the street from a small house, its lights dim, but still on. A car was parked outside. There was nothing remarkable about it, nothing out of the ordinary. But then, as I watched, I noticed something. A man was standing on the porch, looking around. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt, his face obscured. He didn't seem to be doing anything in particular, just standing there. I couldn't make out his expression, but there was something off about the way he was moving. And then, suddenly, a van pulled up to the house. The man on the porch stepped forward, looking down the street, and then he moved quickly to the side of the house. He was gone for only a moment, but when he returned, he wasn't alone. There was someone with him, a woman, struggling against his grip. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. The man pulled her toward the van, forcing her inside. She screamed, but her cries were quickly muffled. The van doors slammed shut, and the vehicle sped off down the street. I sat there, frozen in disbelief. What had I just witnessed? Was it happening right now? Was this real? I couldn't pull myself away. I couldn't stop watching. But as I stared at the screen, I felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The feed cut again. And then, without warning, the chat window below the video lit up with a message, "You're next." I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the screen, paralyzed with fear. But something told me it was time to leave. I had seen enough. Whatever this was, it wasn't something I wanted to be part of. I closed my laptop, but the feeling didn't go away. It lingered. Like a shadow, always there, waiting. But it wasn't over. A week later, I received an email. It had no subject line, and the body of the message was blank. But there was an attachment, a file named u_no_what_u_did.mp4. I didn't open it. But I knew. I knew that somehow, I hadn't just stumbled upon something on the deep web. I had been watched. And now, the people behind those streams were watching me. They were out there. And they knew my name. Hey, everyone. My name's Jake. I know. You've probably heard the stories about the dark web, how it's full of twisted things, the kind of stuff you're not supposed to see. I always thought they were just exaggerated. After all, it's the internet. People talk a lot. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes, those stories are real. This is one of them. And trust me, you want to hear this one. It started when I was in high school, about 3 years ago. I'd always been into tech, computers, and the digital world. I knew my way around the internet like most people know their way around their own neighborhood. But like most curious teens, I had a curiosity that didn't stop at the surface. I'd heard about the deep web. You know, the parts of the internet where most of the unspeakable stuff happens. It seemed like the kind of place a person could disappear into, and maybe, that's exactly why I wanted to see it for myself. I remember one night, scrolling through Reddit. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just killing time, when I stumbled upon a thread. The title was simple, "Ever been to the Codebreaker?" It was a cryptic post, and of course, I clicked. The post was from a user named RedTeam007, and it talked about an elusive website on the deep web that supposedly had a series of puzzles or codes, things so intricate and hard to crack that it was said to be a challenge for even the best hackers. But there was more. The people who solved the code supposedly uncovered something hidden deep in the internet, something worth more than money. I didn't think much of it at first. It sounded like one of those urban legends or internet myths that always pop up. But then I saw the comments. People had posted pictures of a website with a string of numbers and symbols, codes I'd never seen before, all buried within a dark web page with a black background and minimal text. A part of me told me to stop right there. But the curiosity kept pulling at me. So, the next day, I did it. I downloaded Tor and learned how to navigate to the darker corners of the web. To be honest, it felt like I was stepping into a different world. The sheer secrecy of it all was thrilling, but also unsettling. I used the link from the post and found the website. It wasn't anything spectacular. Just a black screen with a white message at the center, "Solve the code, and the truth will find you." And below, a series of encrypted text. It looked complicated. Like something from an old sci-fi movie, random letters and numbers, shifting and changing. I almost closed the page right there, but something inside me clicked. I had to know what was behind it. I spent hours trying to crack the code. I did everything, decryption algorithms, code-breaking tools, and just plain guessing. Finally, around 2 a.m., I cracked it. The numbers and letters transformed into coordinates and a date. Find the answer at 1234 Rosewood Avenue, 11 p.m. I thought it was a prank. Or maybe it was one of those escape room challenges people were into at the time. But something gnawed at me. Why would someone go through the trouble of setting up such an elaborate puzzle? Why would they ask for an exact address? I knew I should have stopped there. But of course, I didn't. I drove to the address the next evening. Rosewood Avenue was just an old residential street, full of rundown houses and overgrown lawns. It was completely ordinary, except for one thing, the house. It was a two-story, dilapidated building at the far end of the street. The windows were boarded up. The door? Slightly ajar. My heart was pounding, but my curiosity was stronger. I walked up to the door and pushed it open. The smell of mildew and decay hit me immediately. It was like no one had lived there in years. Inside, it was eerily silent. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I stepped carefully over the worn, rotting wood. There was no furniture, only dust-covered floors and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. Then, I saw it. On the wall near the stairs was a projector. It was old, the kind you might see in a school or an office. The lens was pointing toward a large white sheet nailed to the wall, the only thing in the room that seemed intentional. I was about to move closer when I heard a sound behind me, footsteps. I froze. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. But the footsteps didn't stop. They grew louder, and that's when I realized, someone else was in the house with me. My heart raced as I quickly scanned the room. I didn't see anyone, but I could feel the presence of someone, something. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The projector suddenly flickered to life. A video appeared on the white sheet, grainy at first. But as the images stabilized, I could make out the faces of several people. Each one looking directly into the camera, their expressions terrified. I recognized some of them. They were people from the deep web. But not the kind you'd want to recognize. These weren't the harmless trolls or forum users. They were the ones behind the mystery. The ones who had solved the code and gone too far. And that's when I realized what I had stumbled upon. These weren't just random people, they were victims. Each one had been tied up, filmed, and then left as a part of some twisted game. A game I had unknowingly entered. I spun around, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have come here. You're part of it now." I ran. I didn't care about the details anymore. I bolted from the house, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. The screen was still playing the video in my head, the faces of the victims burned into my mind. But as I reached my car and sped down Rosewood Avenue, something happened. The deep web hadn't just been watching me. They had found me. The text messages started flooding in. It was them. People with access to everything. They knew my name. They knew where I lived. They knew who I had been talking to. Each message sent a wave of panic through me. But they also gave me something else, an ultimatum. I couldn't turn back. I had uncovered something bigger than me, something real. I stopped looking for answers. The codes, the games, the dark web, it wasn't worth it. I didn't want to become part of some twisted underground network. I erased all traces of what I'd found. Changed my identity. Moved far away from the chaos I had brought upon myself. That's the part of the story I'll never forget, the part where I realized that sometimes, curiosity doesn't just kill the cat. It drags you into something you'll never escape from. So, if you're out there, thinking about going down the same path, stop. It's not worth it. My name is Alex Harper. I'm just a regular guy, at least, that's what I tell myself. I live in a small apartment in the heart of the city, working a dull office job that I've grown numb to over the past few years. You know the type, cubicle walls, endless spreadsheets, meetings that go nowhere. I've never been the adventurous type, the kind of person who dives headfirst into danger or thrill-seeking experiences. I'm a bit of a loner, to be honest. My social life? Practically non-existent. Outside of work, I'm mostly on my laptop, watching videos, reading forums, and scrolling through social media. I've always had an unhealthy obsession with the internet, though. I've spent years exploring the depths of it, from the mundane to the bizarre. I'm the kind of person who stumbles down rabbit holes in the middle of the night, reading about obscure topics or diving into conspiracy theories that would make most people's heads spin. But even for someone like me, someone who knows how to sift through nonsense to find hidden gems, there was always one part of the web that I never touched, the deep web. I'd heard the stories of illicit trades, terrifying forums, and untraceable criminals, but it always felt like an urban legend, something whispered about but never truly seen. It was always a curiosity I could never fully scratch. After all, the deep web isn't the place where normal people go, right? But, despite all my hesitation, there was this gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. A curiosity that refused to be ignored. What was it really like down there? What did it hold beyond the surface, beyond the reach of search engines and government surveillance? It was a Friday night when I finally gave in. I was alone in my apartment, a bottle of cheap beer beside me, scrolling aimlessly through my laptop. My mind was hazy, tired from the workweek. I'd had too much time to think, and I was starting to feel restless. It was then that I saw it, a post on a tech forum I'd been visiting for years. The thread was titled simply, "Ever wondered about the deep web? You think you're ready for the deep web? You have no idea what you're in for. But if you're serious, I'll show you how to get in." The words lingered in my mind long after I closed the laptop for the night. It wasn't long before I started to search for more, about how to access the deep web, what tools I'd need, how to stay safe. A couple of hours later, after a lot of reading in some reckless confidence, I downloaded the Tor browser, set up a secure VPN, and I was in. A few people had already replied to it, most of them cautioning against exploring the deep web. But as I read their comments, my curiosity only grew. One post stood out to me, though. It was written by someone with the username Cypher_77. The post read, "I remember the first time I logged on to Tor. The world I'd entered wasn't anything like what I expected. It wasn't a dark, ominous place with flashing red lights and black market sellers shouting at me. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The surface web was a carnival compared to this. There was an eerie calm, a sense that I was walking in someone else's backyard. I told myself I'd only explore for a little while, just a quick look around, nothing too crazy. But the deeper I went, the more I realized how much I didn't know. How much I had no business knowing. And that was when I found the thread. It didn't look like much at first, just another post among thousands, a few cryptic words. But something about it hooked me. It was as if I'd been waiting for it without even knowing. I clicked on it. I thought I was prepared for what was next. I had no idea how wrong I was. The next day, I didn't think much of what happened the night before. After all, I had just been curious, right? It was probably nothing. A few strange moments in the dark corners of the internet. What harm could it do? I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't some naive fool walking blindly into danger. But I couldn't shake the lingering feeling, like something had shifted. I decided to share what happened with Liam. He was the closest thing I had to a friend. We had been buddies since high school, and despite our different interests, we'd always stuck together. Liam was a gamer, tech geek, and to be honest, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. He was the type to talk about the dark web as if he had it all figured out. And if anyone would understand what I had gotten myself into, it would be him. I sat across from him at our usual hangout, a rundown cafe with dim lighting and old wooden tables, the kind where we could sit for hours without anyone bothering us. I told him about the thread, the game, and the strange feeling I had as I explored deeper into the hidden layers of the internet. "Are you serious?" Liam asked, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "You actually clicked on it?" I nodded, feeling a twinge of guilt. I could see the skepticism in his eyes, mixed with a bit of disbelief. "Man, that's bold," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose. "People don't mess with the deep web. You get curious, you get caught in something much worse. You don't want to be on anyone's radar down there." "I'm not some idiot," I replied, shrugging. "I used a VPN. I didn't give them anything. I'm not stupid." Liam leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the wooden surface. Still, you've got to be careful. That's the kind of stuff that leads to bad places. People get lost in that world. It messes with your head. I could tell that he was a little freaked out, but there was also this spark of intrigue in his eyes. His face softened after a moment. "Okay," he said, "show me. I want to see it." I pulled out my laptop and opened Tor. I had bookmarked the thread, of course. Part of me had hoped it was some fleeting, strange encounter, something that would fade away in the memory like a nightmare. But I couldn't deny the pull. I navigated to the thread I had clicked on the night before. As I opened it, Liam's expression changed. The casual smirk faded, and his eyes grew wide as he saw the words on the screen. "Do you want to play a game?" He leaned in, his fingers hovering near the keyboard. I felt his curiosity grow, and despite my earlier misgivings, I could see it too, the same fascination that had drawn me in. Liam wasn't the kind of guy to back down from a challenge. "Should we?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. Something about this felt different now. Maybe it was because I wasn't alone anymore. The very act of showing Liam seemed to make it more real, more dangerous. But Liam was already moving his mouse to click the link. He didn't even wait for me to respond. Before I could stop him, he clicked. We both stared at the screen, where a new message appeared. "You've chosen. Now, prove yourselves." The screen flickered briefly, and the eerie black and green text appeared once more. Liam's eyes widened, but instead of backing away, he leaned closer. I felt a sinking feeling in my chest. This wasn't just some strange online game, it was something else. I could feel it, deep in my gut. But Liam was too far gone, already engrossed in whatever it was we had triggered. A timer appeared on the screen, counting down from 5 minutes. "We have to figure this out," Liam said, eyes glued to the screen. "It's just a challenge. It'll be fun, right?" I wasn't so sure anymore, but I couldn't back out now. We were already in too deep. We solved the first puzzle quickly. It felt almost like a game, as if we were trying to outwit the system. The puzzles got harder, more cryptic. As the minutes ticked away, I felt a growing sense of dread, but Liam seemed unaffected. In fact, he looked more excited with every step, like he was feeding off the danger. Then, the next message appeared. "You've completed the first challenge. But the real test begins now. Your task, go deeper." The words almost felt like they were taunting us. But Liam was already clicking away, moving us to the next page. This one was different. The screen was filled with disturbing images, distorted faces, and unsettling animations. It looked like a collage of horror, shadows, symbols, and shapes that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. "Dude, this is messed up," I said, feeling my pulse quicken. "Yeah, but it's just part of the game," Liam replied. He didn't seem scared, but I could see his hands trembling slightly. I was starting to regret ever clicking on the thread, but then, something changed. A message appeared on the screen that made my blood run cold. "Liam has failed." "What the hell is this?" Liam muttered, his fingers freezing above the keyboard. "It doesn't make sense." Before I could ask him what he meant, the timer on the screen stopped. Then, a new message appeared. "Liam is no longer part of the game." The words were simple, direct. But something about it sent a wave of terror crashing over me. I glanced over at Liam. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Liam?" I said, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" Liam was no longer responding. I turned to him, my heart pounding. He was staring blankly at the screen, but it wasn't like him to act this way. His lips moved, but no sound came out. I grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. "Liam. But when I looked down at his face, something was off. His expression was empty, like someone had wiped his mind clean. His eyes were unfocused, staring straight ahead. "Liam!" I screamed. "Snap out of it!" But there was no response. Suddenly, the power in the room flickered, and the lights went out. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. When they came back on, Liam was gone. I searched the entire apartment, calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. His phone was still on the table, untouched. It was like he had simply vanished. The screen on my laptop remained open. The message still lingered. "Liam has failed. You will not be leaving." I didn't know what had happened to him. All I knew was that I was no longer in control. I was trapped in something far darker than I could comprehend. I had gone too deep, and now the game wasn't just online. It was real.
As the final echoes of the tale fade into the darkness, remember this: in the shadows where fear takes root, the true horror lies not in the creatures that lurk, but in the darkness within ourselves. We tell these stories not just to scare or entertain, but to confront the fears that we try so hard to ignore. So as you step back into the light of the real world, carry with you the lessons of the night. The monsters we create are reflections of our deepest anxieties, and the strength to overcome them is within each of us. Sleep well, and remember, in the realm of fear, we are the true masters of our fate. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell for you to see my future update on this channel. Stay safe and always remember to lock your doors.